Hi, my name's Lucinda. Welcome to Loving Literature. Do you feel lost when your friends go on and on about the details of the movie you just saw? Or maybe you're in school and you dread going to English class because you have no idea what to say about the story you've just read. If either of those situations sound familiar, this video series could be for you. In this series, I'll give reading tips for textbooks and stories, their structure, elements, and genres, so that you'll have something to add to the discussions. If you love literature, I hope you'll join us too, because sharing ideas about the stories we love can be fun. In this episode of Loving Literature, I'm going to talk about character. Now, I could talk a long time about character because I've been an actor and a director for many years, and I decided I'd better split up the information. So in this video, I'm going to talk about character backgrounds and how that affects the actions that they do, their motivations, and it also affects the conflict in the story. In the next episode, I'll talk about the different types of characters that a writer can use to flesh out their story. I hope you enjoy it. Let's talk about character motivations and backgrounds. So, why is it important to understand character motivations? Well, think about your own life. You have things that happen to you in the past that affect the way you interact with others, right? Sometimes what happened to you influences the decisions that you make and how you dream your life will be. What you experienced previously might also affect the goals you have in your life and how you go about making them come true. Now, maybe you never thought about that before, but it's true. If your background and things that happened to you in the past influence how you do things, it's the same with characters in a story. So knowing something about the characters' backstories, as they're often called in plays and literature, makes it easier to see why the characters in any story do what they do. Learning to understand characters' motivations might also help you figure out a little bit about why you think, feel, and do the things the way you do. Something important to remember is that authors only give the backstories of the most important characters in the story. So let's look at the backstories of Harry and Voldemort so that we can discuss how they are alike and how they are different. Voldemort and Harry have similar backgrounds. Both of them were orphaned at a young age. They both grew up in the Muggle world, and both were put into foster homes. They both felt alone and misunderstood. The thing that makes them different, however, is the fact that Harry's parents loved him deeply and sacrificed themselves so that he could live. Whereas Voldemort wasn't as lucky. His family didn't love him. Because Harry was dearly loved by his parents, they left that love inside of him. Dumbledore tells Harry that love lives in all the cells in his body, and that's why when Professor Quirrell touches Harry in the first movie and book, the love in his skin protects him and Professor Quirrell dies. Because Harry is sustained by love, his life choices are very different than Voldemort's. It's always important in any story for the reader or the viewer to hear the villain's story too, because when we get a chance to hear their story, we understand them better. We may not like what they do, but we can understand why they do it, and we get to see it from their point of view. In the case of Voldemort and Harry, we understand that they have very similar goals. Harry's dearest wish is to be part of a loving family. I think Voldemort wants the same thing. They just go about getting what they want in different ways. Voldemort thinks that he has to conquer people and force them to love him, while Harry loves his friends and stands by them no matter what. This is how he begins to create a loving support system for himself. Because of who Harry is, people want to follow him. People follow Voldemort because they are afraid of him. And maybe they didn't experience a lot of love in their lives either, so they don't know anything different. They think that following him will make them stronger. A good storyteller lets the audience or the reader in on the villain's reasons for doing what they are doing. In the Harry Potter series, J.K. Rowling fills the reader in on Voldemort's background in really interesting ways. She has someone find Tom Riddle's diary, which later shows us the past from Voldemort's point of view. And then by using the pensieve, Harry can see events in the past from other people's memories of Tom Riddle. And so that in that way, we are filled in a little bit about why Voldemort is doing what he's doing. Using both those methods, we can see how Tom Riddle became Lord Voldemort. There is something else to consider when trying to understand villains. I once heard an actor who played lots of villains say that the villain is the hero of his own story. That's something very important to understand. They think that what they are doing is justified. Knowing this makes the struggle between the hero and the villain more potent because they are both convinced they are doing what is right. Now let's talk a little bit about conflict. So, thinking about what I said about the two main characters and what might put them in opposition to each other brings us to how to look at the conflict between them. First of all, you need to know that there are two kinds of conflict. There is internal and external conflict, and you have to have conflict in a story, otherwise you don't have a good story. Internal conflict is how the character feels about herself or himself, or perhaps about the decisions that she needs to make. A character could be trying to heal from a traumatic experience, or maybe they feel guilty about something that happened in their past. In Harry's case, he has more than one internal conflict. He's the boy who lived, which means that in the wizarding world, people expect great things from him. That puts a great burden on him to succeed. The problem is, he didn't grow up in the magical world, so he has to play catch up in a way. He's got to learn so much information that other students already know. And of course, he's still trying to deal with the death of his parents. But at the same time, he has Voldemort trying to kill him all the time. This brings us to external conflict. External conflict is something outside the character that they have to try to solve or defeat. It's usually something like a person in the form of a villain, or it can be an organization or a group of people. It often has to do with the main character trying to save themselves or their town or their country, the world, or the universe. The most interesting characters are the ones who have to deal with both kinds of conflict. As I pointed out before, Harry has to deal with both internal and external conflicts, and that makes him extremely interesting. He's not perfect, he makes mistakes, and we love him all the more for that because he's like us. Voldemort, on the other hand, has never dealt with anything that happened to him when he was young. He doesn't acknowledge that he has any inner conflict at all. He tries to ease his pain by trying to control everything outside of himself. And as we see at the end of the story, that doesn't work. People leave him and he dies. I'll refer back to conflict when I talk about theme, but for now, I'll just say that if you pay attention to the major conflicts in a story, they will lead you to the message, which is the theme, that the writer is trying to get across to the reader or the viewer. To end this segment, I want to say that the most interesting characters in a story are the ones who have flaws. None of us is perfect, and so we need to have characters that have flaws like we do. It helps us in a way because if the character has similar flaws to us, then we can learn from them. Now, I want to say when you are discussing stories with your friends and in class, don't be afraid to be bold and have a different opinion than other people in the class or even than the teacher. As a teacher, I love it when my students have different opinions about the story because it makes me think of the story in a new way. And remember, there is more than one right way to interpret a story, so your way is just as good as everyone else's. Thanks for watching this episode of Loving Literature. My name is Lucinda. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you next time.